let's talk about psychological safety. Let's get something straight right out of the gate. If people in your organization are quiet or compliant or complacent or, easy to manage, that's not always a sign that things are working. What it can be, though, is a sign that they don't feel safe enough to actually speak. And psychological safety isn't about being nice. It's not about lowering your standards. It's not about all the feelings and all the fluffy things all the time. And it's definitely not about removing accountability. But what it is about whether people believe that they can actually show up fully. They can tell the truth, they can make mistakes, they can give feedback, and they can challenge your ideas, even the boss's ideas, without being punished or demeaned or humiliated for it. And here's the hard truth. You can't actually scale performance, innovation, or resilience without it. So, what is this psychological safety? What it is this kind of invisible infrastructure of any high-functioning system. It's this thing that we talk about clinically all the time. It really determines whether people speak up before problems explode. And it helps determine whether or not teams will learn or repeat the same mistakes over and over again. The other piece that it involves, especially for us as leaders, is whether we get real information or filtered information or just actually curated silence. So in the clinical work that I do, this psychological safety is imperative. If there's no safety, then there's no processing. And if there's no safety, then that means that there's no growth. And so as I've looked at this with clients, I never thought about it in the context of business until I started my own business and started having a team. And I realized that the same concept that's applicable with my clients is also applicable with my team. And so the exact same rule applies to leadership, teams, and organizations. If there's no safety, there's no verbal processing, there's no development, there's no ideas. And so when there's none of this stuff, there's also no growth. And as companies and as organizations, we want growth. We want that innovation. We want that creativity. And so when we think about psychological safety, there is this difference between knowing and believing. I tell people all the time that the furthest distance in the world is the 18 inches between here and here. And so I may know that I'm psychologically safe. I may know oh no, it's fine. I can share my opinions or I can share feedback or I can say XYZ at work and it's okay. But do I actually believe that I won't be embarrassed for asking a question or not knowing the answer? Or I won't be punished for admitting that I made a mistake? And so psychological safety is this shared belief that you have deep in here, not just up here, that you won't be embarrassed for asking a question. You won't be punished privately or publicly. You won't be humiliated or demeaned for admitting a mistake. And you won't be shut down for challenging an idea or giving feedback or questioning your leader or your boss. And in these ways, when we create a system and a space where people can do that, then it's actually better for all of us. When you know this in here and you believe this in here that there's psychological safety, you know that you won't be excluded from things at a business level, a professional level, or a personal level for being honest. And so really what psychological safety actually does is it answers this really core nervous system question that all of us as humans have, whether we are aware of it or not. And really it's this question of, am I safe here if I am real? When the answer is yes, then people can think more clearly. When people can think more clearly, then collaboration increases. And when collaboration increases, then errors are caught earlier. And when this happens, then accountability actually improves. However, on the flip side, when the answer is no, then people default to a protection and self-preservation stance, not performance. And so what happens is when people are in this protective self-preservation space, you can't learn anything new because you're just sitting there in survival, looking around, trying to make sure that you make it through the end of the day. And when you're in that space, then innovation actually stalls. Creativity isn't happening because you don't have the brain space to be creative or to think outside the box or to be innovative, because all of this energy is coming to make sure that you're safe. When that's happening, then guess what? Burnout actually accelerates and increases because all of a sudden I don't have any emotional space or energy to start to take care of myself or to rest or to relax because I'm constantly in this survival space. And then when this happens, all of a sudden, as leaders, we become reactive because people aren't performing the way that we expect or we need them to. And so when we become reactive, then people go into this psychological unsafe space, and then they shut down even more, or they become more reactive or withdrawal. And so it starts to create this cycle. And so when we think about psychological safety, there's often a couple myths that are out there. So let's just kibosh those. Psychological safety is not just, touchy-feely comfort, fluffy, warm, cozy. It's not everybody has a consensus. It's definitely not weak leadership. It takes a lot of guts and a lot of courage to create psychological safety in your organization and in your team. It's not a lack of consequences. It's not a lack of accountability. And it doesn't mean that everybody gets a voice all the time and we all have to agree before any decisions are made. That is not what psychological safety is. However, high psychological safety environments still hold people to standards. We still expect people to take ownership for their actions, their behaviors, their feelings, their projects. It addresses poor performance. It communicates quickly, efficiently, clearly, and in a helpful manner. It also actually makes hard decisions, because when decisions are avoiding being made, or when you're avoiding making decisions, especially hard ones, what happens is then your team starts to feel that. They start to feel this uncertainty. They start to have questions, and people will start to make up stories in their head about what's going on. And when that happens, then all of a sudden, people feel like they're walking on eggshells because they don't know what's going on. And so when you as a leader can make hard decisions, it actually can help create psychological safety in your organization and in your team. The big difference is how you handle those pieces. It doesn't remove pressure. It doesn't remove expectations. But what it does remove is this fear-based silence of, I don't know if I'm okay here, and I don't know if I can show up and be myself and be honest and ask questions. And so when we look at our teams and we look at our organizations, we start to ask ourselves, so how do we know that there is psychological safety? Well, here's a couple things that you can look for. Do people on your team, in your management, from the entry positions all the way up to senior positions, do people raise issues early on, or do they wait until it's on the cusp of falling apart and exploding before things are talked about? Feedback actually flows back and forth in both directions. It goes top down, bottom up. There's this open element of communication. And again, it doesn't mean that you have to be, communicative all the time, every day with everybody on your team. It doesn't mean that, but it does mean that there is an environment where feedback is welcomed in both directions and it's done in a constructive manner, and it's actually done for the purposes of helping your team be better, helping the individual be better, and helping the organization be better. When people make mistakes, they're looked at, they're examined, they're not hidden. And when they're looked at, again, it's done in a productive way where you can start to look at going, okay, so what happened? Why did it happen? Is there a lack of communication? Is there a lack of knowledge? Is there a lack of skill? And let's come up with a solution and a process to actually fix these things. Again, it's done in a helpful way where people aren't afraid that they're going to get canned just because they made a mistake. Conflict is productive and not personal. And this can be really challenging, especially if you struggle with conflict. And so when people come to you with conflict, or you feel like there's a conflict, if you can go into this conflict with curiosity actually promotes conversation, whereas confrontation really does often promote conflict and kind of more reactive and explosive behavior. And so when there is conflict, can you be curious about the situation and about what's happening? And so it's not about the person, it's not personal to the person or to yourself, it's actually about the situation. When we have psychological safety in our organizations, we as leaders get more unfiltered data. People aren't hedging what they're saying. They're not, filtering everything. They're more likely to pop in and out and go, hey, how's it going? Oh, this is something that I noticed. Or, this thing happened and I'm not sure. And you're going to get more unfiltered data. And when you get more unfiltered data, then all of a sudden you have so much more knowledge around what's going on. And that gives you such good information on what you can do or what you can implement or what you can delegate to actually help resolve problems and conflicts and issues way before they become bigger and much messier. And so how do we know when it's missing? Well, have you ever sat in a meeting with your team or in a boardroom, and maybe you're running the meeting, or maybe somebody else is running the meeting and you're just attending, and nobody provides any thoughts, feedbacks, questions? It's just quiet. At the end of the meeting, the person facilitating or the leader goes, hey, anybody have any thoughts or questions, or what are your thoughts about this? And there's nothing. That's always a big red flag. If we have been sitting in a meeting for half an hour and nobody has any thoughts or questions or feedback or curiosities about what's been going on or what's been talked about, either I'm very boring and everybody has fallen asleep, or nobody's interested in the topic, or maybe they don't feel safe enough to actually provide feedback or ask questions because they have this fear of being humiliated or punished for bringing up thoughts or feelings or insights or questions or curiosities. What happens though is that these meetings are really quiet, but then they get really messy later on, because all of those questions, all of those concerns, it all starts to come out in this kind of crosstalk between your team or, between leaders later. And so not everybody is hearing the same information. And so these problems are then discussed in hallways, they're discussed at the water cooler, they're discussed via, your internal chat system. They're not actually being discussed in the room when everybody's there. And so these are, just one of the ways. When we look at our team, are people over-functioning? So it's not just high functioning, it's like over-functioning, or are they completely disengaged? That's always a question that I want to look at when I'm, working with members of my team. What is kind of their optimal level of functioning? What does it look like when they're over-functioning, and what does it look like when they're disengaged? Because that's really helpful information for me to know, oh, there's something going on here, and maybe I can step in and actually help facilitate to help them get back into their optimal level of functioning. And so when we don't have these things, we're often blindsided because communication isn't reaching us, because there isn't this unfiltered communication. It's all censored, it's all fractured. And so when something does happen, then we as leaders feel blindsided and we're like, what the heck? Why did nobody tell me? Well, It's because we have not created a culture of psychological safety. In fact, the culture has actually become the opposite. It becomes brittle. It feels like people are walking on eggshells. And I don't know if you've ever felt like you're walking on eggshells. I think most people have. It is a terrible, terrible, terrible feeling. And it causes so much reactivity and anxiety and nervousness and stress for people that nobody really wants to work in that type of environment. And so this is really where I see a lot of organizations getting it wrong. And I'm not saying that we have done it perfectly, because we have not. This is an area that I still have to work on a regular basis. What we try to do is we try to fix the behavior without actually addressing the underlying issues of the safety. We put, performance reviews in place. We put PIPs in place. We, do all of these things where it's like, okay, well, you have to do XYZ, without necessarily looking at the reason why they have to do XYZ to actually meet those expectations. Is there a lack of communication? Is there a lack of knowledge, a lack of skill, a lack of leadership? What is going on? And not saying that PIPs are bad or wrong or anything like that, because they're not. Those are necessary. But if we address the safety piece first, then I wonder what would happen and what would change for you and your teams. And so when we think about psychological safety, it's not actually a team trait. It's a leadership outcome. So let me explain. We as leaders create safety by how we respond to bad news, how we handle mistakes, how we invite feedback and being challenged, both privately and publicly, how we regulate ourselves under pressure. And that doesn't just mean pressure in that high stakes meeting with those stakeholders. It also means, how do we regulate ourselves after that meeting when maybe it didn't go so well? Do we get really snippy and snappy and agitated and irritable with our team, and do we lose our crap? Or are we able to work through and emotionally regulate ourselves even in those moments where maybe things didn't go the way that we wanted them to? Our teams and people around us aren't watching what we say. What they are doing, though, is they are watching what happens after somebody speaks up. So if we're in a meeting, we're in a board meeting, a big team meeting, and we invite questions, thoughts, feedback, and somebody on our team speaks up and challenges us or provides feedback that isn't positive that we want to hear. How do we respond? One defensive reaction can undo months and months of trust building. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be perfect. God knows I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. We all make mistakes, and that's okay. However, what it does mean is, are you willing and are you going to go back and repair that defensive reaction and apologize and own it? If we want our teams to do it, we actually have to model it first. And so if we react and we are defensive in response, then we have to be very intentional about going back and repairing. And if that defensive response happens in a group environment, we need to go back and apologize in that group environment. If it happens in a one-on-one, we need to go back and apologize and repair in that one-on-one. If it happens in a group and we just go and repair with a one afterwards, what happens is the rest of the people in that group haven't seen that repair, and they have felt the fracture by proxy. So that repair also needs to be done. And so how can you assess psychological safety in real time? These are some questions that you can ask yourself. Do people challenge you, or do they just agree? Does your team ask you questions and provide you a different perspective or a different thought or a different approach? Or is every idea and everything that comes out of your mouth just brilliant and everybody thinks it's great and nobody disagrees with you? Do you hear about problems early on, or do you hear about them late? This is something that I had to experience with my team a couple years ago, where there were some problems happening and I didn't know about them till afterwards. And when I found out about it afterwards, what I had to do is I had to go and sit down with each one of the people on my team and ask them what it was that they did not feel like they could come to me and talk to me about it. And so as they shared with me what it was that they were feeling and why they didn't come share it with me, we were able to work through it and communicate and talk through it. And, they were able to explain, I was able to explain, and we were able to repair this kind of fracture that happened by proxy, though not directly, to help increase that psychological safety. And so it's something that I still have to do on a regular basis. It's not just a one and done thing. And so, these are some things that we need to check in on a consistent basis, because psychological safety isn't just something that's done once. It's something that we have to do all the time. When you are in a meeting, in a group meeting, who talks the least in the room? So who's the one that just doesn't share? That's always an interesting question to ask yourself, and then pursue that. What is it? Why is that? What's going on there? And maybe we can start to have conversations where people actually feel like they can share more. And what are the topics that never get raised? You would think they would get raised, but they never get raised. And then this is what I want you to ask your team. Okay, this can feel very vulnerable and very challenging and very risky, but it is worth it. What is hard to say here? And you can't react. All you can do is respond and say, thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that. I'm going to jot that down so this way I can reflect on it and we can circle back to that. What feels risky to bring up? That's also a very challenging one, right? Because we don't know what people are going to say. And where do we avoid conflict? Especially if you are conflict avoidant, this is going to be really hard, but so valuable. And so if these questions feel threatening for you, that's really good data and information for you. If those questions feel threatening, that means that you personally, as a leader, as a boss, as a manager, need to go and do some of your own internal work around personal and professional development, personal, professional coaching, therapy, if you're into that. I highly recommend it, but I'm biased. And it's something where working through kind of that emotional intelligence and emotional awareness as to why that feels threatening, so you can deal with that. So this way you can actually come back and create that psychological safety for your team. And so psychological safety is not a soft skill. It's a performance multiplier. And it's the difference between compliance and commitment, burnout and sustainability, control and trust, and short-term output and long-term capacity. And so if we think about capacity as the ceiling and emotional regulation is the stabilizer, then psychological safety is the floor. And you can't build anything durable without it. And so if you're leading people clinically, corporately, operationally, this isn't something that's optional. It's actually your job.